Well, hello. My job today is to convince you that, in fact, unlike what a former prime minister said, you can do sociology, and you can do sociology in organizations, and now's the time to do it. What we have when we look at the issue of culture is a challenge about how we really look at the way that we measure it. The key of measuring culture is to measure commitment and willingness to give discretionary effort. Is your culture aligned with strategic business objectives? Does it have things in it that are, in fact, weighing you down, preventing you from achieving those directives? So we need to understand the unique elements of your organization's strategic culture. We need to assess how well it is delivering now. You actually need to measure it in order to manage it. And you need to understand at a deeper level what the engagement and disengagement drivers are within your current strategic culture. So what we look for is a technique, a measurement system that really goes beyond what is currently in the industry now, which are engagement surveys. These are more topographical assessments. They're really symptomatic rather than looking at the etiology. Many organizations, in fact, are maxed out on engagement. They've reached an asymptote of their performance. And they're frustrated. The responses are becoming less accurate. These are long surveys. They're sometimes tedious and so forth. And they offer few diagnostics for further engagement gains. And people are often coming to us and saying, well, what do we do now? We've been parked at this level of engagement for this many years, but we can't seem to understand what the next steps would be. So they're limiting, therefore, in providing levers and methods for change, and what we're talking about in many cases is a need for cultural transformation. Leaders also have a difficult time actually seeing themselves in the data. How am I contributing to the culture? How might I be contaminating the culture? And as we know, senior leaders carry 70–80% of the culture message to the employees below. So the newer approaches that have been looked at are much simpler than the engagement approaches. They're briefer. They are simpler. The simplicity needs to come in form of both the measurement and the analysis and the communication and the presentation. People need to be able to pick this up and work with it. Okay? The best measurement technique is the one that is actually used and implemented, obviously. So these measurement tools also need to have scientific properties. They need validity and reliability. We also think that you're best served when they are customizable and non-prescriptive. Rather than a survey that tells you this is the way the culture should be, we know that cultures are differentiated in the marketplace. And as attractors of talent, we speak a lot about how that culture is different from this culture. So we need an instrument that allows for that. And yet we need something that's highly diagnostic and practical, okay, that can actually lead us towards cultural transformation. One example is, and there are many, there are about 15 very credible values surveys in the academic literature and then a handful in the commercial field. One of the ones that we sometimes recommend, we're a little bit tool agnostic, but we do find that the Barrett survey is one that people really cotton on to. It's very simple, 3 questions. Takes people in the organization less than 10 minutes to complete, and it asks 3 simple questions. First, describe yourself. Tell us what's important to you. What are your cherished values? Secondly, describe your organization in terms of the top values and norms and practices that you experience every day when you walk through the door. What are the salient things that hit you? And these could be both positive and negative. And then finally, describe the desired values you have for your ideal workplace. What would be the aspirational culture that you'd love to work in? Now, the Barrett survey is actually very well theoretically grounded. It is a model of the spectrum of personal and generalized later to organizational consciousness. For those of you who are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I don't think anyone wouldn't be in this audience, you'll recognize that at the bottom of the diagram. But beyond those needs-based issues, there can be a level of transformation achieved wherein the individual or the organization will become self-aware enough to know what its issues are, what its negative practices and behaviors are, and how it can really fix those. So once you are aware of the issues, you can control them. You can't lead, you can't manage without that measurement, knowledge, and awareness. And then finally, at the top, you have greater articulation of the self-actualization of the organization. So what we're talking about here is, at the bottom, unmet needs from the Maslowian hierarchy are what we call the entropy, which is borrowed from the term from physics. And those are the organizational forces, norms, behaviors, practices, and so forth, that contribute to disorganization, devolution of the corporate entity and structure. They're wasted energy, and they act as impediments to growth, and they destroy employee engagement. So we take a two-pronged approach here. First, we want to eliminate entropy. Secondly, we also want to build an alignment with a strategically defined positive culture. In the Barrett example, what we get is very simple data that's easy to communicate. We simply get counts, how many votes people make for a certain value. We then compare and contrast the three questions: self, current organization, and desired culture. And the two key metrics we get are, as I mentioned, the organizational entropy, and then secondly, alignment with the espoused strategic values of the organization. We also get an employee to culture fit, and this is a big issue. Can you show up to work every day? Can you live an authentic self? Can you know that you're going to be backed and supported by the people around you? And then secondly, there are gaps between the current and desired culture. For instance, we can see that people will ask the culture for more of something that particularly might be important to them. So I have an audience participation question at the moment, and that's the following. Please grab your clickers and answer the following. Which of these important personal values, so these are cherished values that Canadians hold and show up in many organizations, is most underfulfilled in the current corporate cultures of Canadian companies today? Is it achievement as a personal value, creativity, accountability, or continuous learning? Creativity. Interesting. The actual answer is accountability, which is the third most selected. Canadians are remarkable for their wish to be held accountable. It's a very relational kind of value. We are, relative to the talks we've just heard about Trump in the US, a more feminine culture. You can load accountability onto people and they will not mind at all. Okay, so although we often think that people might skirt their responsibilities, people in fact invite. They want to be team players. They want to be held to a higher standard of accountability. And even if your organization has high accountability, they will demand more. So a bit of a surprising finding there. So measurement is a tool. It's a step along our journey. We can ask, what are we doing well? Where do we need to improve? What are our strengths and weaknesses? What are our opportunities for development? And by burrowing into the data a little bit and looking at business units, we can ask which of the leaders and teams need the most help. At this point, we really have to carefully craft an improvement plan and educate our leaders about what the cultural forces are and what culture is going to look like in future. So in order to lead well, we've learned a number of things with our customers. First of all, it's hard work. It requires good socialization and communication and so forth. We need to build on the good and fix the bad. If entropy is at a very high level, we need to address that first, but usually you can run in parallel, decreasing the bad while increasing the good. It needs to happen at both the micro and macro level, the individual and the organizational level. People need to be, at an individual level, able to see their contributions and contaminations to the culture. We need to be clear, especially about accountabilities and what people are going to be held accountable for in terms of behaviors and practices going forward, in order that they can bring that culture to life, to manifest it fully. The leaders need to step up and lead. They need to model this for employees farther down in the hierarchy. And we recommend that you focus carefully, only pick one or two high priority items in the early going, and make sure that these come into alignment with your strategic business plan and the culture that you need to develop to support it. And finally, it's an iterative journey. So go out, begin, be focused, remeasure at a suitable interval later, and come back and iterate from there. So the key takeaways are: measuring the delivery of strategic culture requires simple, effective tools, and engagement surveys are not quite enough anymore. Measurement is certainly not the end goal, it's the enabler. And tools like the Barrett actually start great conversations about what our culture is like, what it needs to be like to support business strategy, and so forth.